Well, hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Barriers and Boundaries Resilience Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, DB, and a very special guest, Nina Sossamon-Pogue. Just a pleasure to have you on the show. How you doing, Nina?
I'm doing great, EB. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, looking forward to discussing, here at Barriers and Boundaries, we talk about healthy employees creating healthy organizations, and there's a personal resilience, there's an organizational resilience. And one of the things that was fascinating about you as just looking at, people who are focusing on resilience these days and just how much of your story kind of ties into both. There's that personal resilience aspect to it, but then you've really been able to kind of and allow organizations to develop resilience just by hearing more of your story. And for those who don't know Nina, I'd be surprised if you didn't, but if you don't, like just a phenomenal, thought-provoking story, and we can get into that. So, what have you been up to these days, Nina?
Excellent. Well, I just finished up a lot of speaking. I just launched an online workshop, went through the holidays. We're recording this in January, so I went through the holidays with my grown kids coming into town. And they love to say my own words back to me sometimes, which is kind of fun too. But yeah, I am in a season of really buckling down and just trying to get my message out to more people. So I really appreciate being here.
Where do you normally like to start with your story?
It always up to the guest. So some people really like to focus on the years I was a gymnast. So I was moved away from home at 13, was on the U.S. gymnastics team, all of that piece. Or some people like to talk about my TV days. I was a news anchor for almost 20 years and won an Emmy Award for best newscaster in the Southeast, like all the big stuff there. And then other people like to talk about my years in tech. So it depends on if I'm on an HR tech conference. I do some HR. That's kind of my sweet spot because I was in the tech space and I do a lot of mental health and stuff now, mental wellness. So I do, sometimes it's the tech space. So it always is up to your audience and what you think would be most interesting to them. But I am an open book, my friend.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. I noticed some of your messagings around the cognitive science, some of that mental well-being. So let's go there. Let's tap into some of that for a little bit. And how did you get connected with the idea of like, wow, cognitive science is so important and how it contributed to your own well-being?
Well, I've had a lot of successes in my life. I mentioned a few of them just now, but
Mm-hmm.
along with those successes, people just see me as someone who's very successful. They don't see the other stuff. I don't talk about the successes. I talk about my failures. I come onto the stage and usually someone tees me up with all of my successes. But in my books and in my speaking and my talking, I mostly talk about my failures. So I didn't make the Olympic team after being on the cover of magazines and Olympic hopeful, back in the day with Mary Lou Retton and Bart Connor and that crowd and traveling all over the world. Then I didn't make it, which was like my first crushing blow at the ripe old age of 16. And then I went to LSU. I became a D1 recruit, top recruit in the nation, went to LSU, powerhouse in gymnastics. And then I blew out my knee my freshman year. And so I was like in a really, very heavy spot there again. I lost my identity when I didn't have gymnastics anymore. I mean, if you think about it now, it's your Instagram or your TikTok feed or whatever. Back then it was like my bumper sticker, my sweatshirt. It was the 80s. And so a little different, but it was still how I identified, and that's a big piece of what everyone's going through now because everybody's life is so public. But that was the next time I really had a real low. And then I was on TV and I got fired. They went younger and blonder one time right after I won, Charleston's favorite news anchor for the 7th year in a row. The next day they called me in and let me go and just budget cuts.
Goodness.
So I talk about, and I've been through a divorce, obviously with the hyphenated name. I just keep adding names. So I am a lesson in resilience in my own life of how I've continued to reinvent myself, but less about the reinvention and more about how you not just get up when you're knocked down, but learn, grow stronger, adapt in a positive way and become more resilient. And it took me a while to get to a place where I was advising other people, became a mentor. And then I had to look at myself and go, oh, wait, what exactly is it that I share? And a lot of it, back to the cognitive behavior question, a lot of it came back to how did I get out of each of those? And then at a point in my 30s, I had a life altering trauma in my life. And I had PTSD. I was in a really dark place. Had some suicidal ideation. I was not thinking clearly and truly in a bad spot, and a lot of cognitive behavior therapy to get me to a better place with that. Yeah. So I use what I've learned myself And I like to say that my books and my speaking is all, it's kind of a mashup of stoicism, science, a little neuroscience, and some cognitive behavior therapy. So it's
Yeah.
kind of my own mashup of all of that.
Was that just someone speaking into your life, or was it you just figured out, I need to change? I got to do this.
I had a therapist. I'm very
Yeah.
pro therapy.
Okay. Yeah. Great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm very pro therapy. A lot of people have asked me to do one on one coaching. And I did recently and sort of reluctantly launch my Now What workshop. But
Mm,
even throughout that, I'm very pro therapy. I'm not a clinical, I'm not clinically trained. I'm not a licensed therapist. I think there's people out there who can handle that a lot better than me. But I can
mm,
get you there, and I can get you to them, or I can get
yeah.
you out of the bad spot. But the people who were my therapist and the books that I read, and I know you obviously from your work that you've done and your
Mm,
faith. I went through this big faith journey where I just thought, well, if this is my life, then if God wanted this for me, then God is not my guy. And
mm,
then I thought maybe I was Buddhist, or maybe I was, at one point, I'm like, I think I'm Lakota Indian, like earth, fire. Like I just went on
mm,
this weird journey and studied every religion and every way out. I was just lost.
yeah.
And the cognitive behavior therapy, that type of thinking, along with some stoicism, is what got me to a better place. And then when I look back at all of the big five failures and the big five points in my life at my lows, those were the same types of thinking and the things that I did that got me out of that. And then
Mm,
and I did probably what you did when you wrote your book. I started researching how did other people get out of it? I launched
yeah.
my own podcast and I started doing interviews with people like, how did you get out of these really dark times? And the repeating themes became the framework that I put together. So
Yeah.
it became a journey. It wasn't just, hey, I just believe in the cognitive behavior stuff. It truly was things that I've done myself that worked for me.
There's a lot of work being done on trauma related responses and a lot of therapy, a lot of books, which I tap into quite a bit myself, just because I'm fascinated with that subject. And you've seen a lot of friends lose a lot of friends to suicide, and
Yeah,
the mental health piece of just living these days, emotional well-being, mental well-being, so crucial. And we bring that to our work. We bring that to the organizations that we show up to every day. And I have this crazy idea that we're giving more than just our time to our organizations. And I think that's what kind of led me to doing this is just, I think leaders need to understand they're not just coming to serve at the job and do a job. Like, this is part of who they are. And that's where your
absolutely.
message resonates a lot is you contribute to, like, being an anchor. That was your life. That's what you were giving yourself to, and all of a sudden it's gone. How do you respond to that?
Well, twofold there. First, I'm right on the same page with you. There is definitely an overlap in your personal and your professional emotions and your personal and professional resilience. They're the same. Everyone struggles. Everyone has struggles they're dealing with. And, maybe your struggles don't seem as bad as somebody else's, but that doesn't discount your struggle. It's your struggle. And no one leaves their struggle at home when they go to work.
Mm,
It's part of you. It's taking up space in your brain. It's taking up my, brain power, emotional strength, all of those things. It's just sidetracking you. So a lot of what I talk about is how you handle the things that are you're struggling with in your life or a big change in your life, a process to make it all make sense and give you something actionable to work on so it feels like you're back in control of it, because a lot of it is a control thing. And yeah, but when I was let go, it's really interesting to think about that overlap. So it was my whole life. I anchored 3 shows a day and I'd been with a TV station for 10 years. And so I'd won Charleston's favorite news anchor. I'm in Charleston, South Carolina.
yeah.
And I'd won Charleston's favorite news anchor 7 years in a row. And it came out in the paper on a Thursday. And so I was walking, it was Friday, the day after, and I'm walking down to cut some news briefs with our weather guy, the evening weatherman. His name's Rob. And he and I are walking like full makeup and hair down to cut some, hey, coming up, it was like 3 o'clock. Hey, coming up today at 5 o'clock, this, that, and the other, and it may rain, whatever the news brief was for that day. And all of a sudden, this woman from the GM's office comes and says, hey, the GM wants to see you. Nina, can you come with me for a sec? And I go, sure. And I said, hey, Rob, I'll be down in a sec. Be right back. I truly thought he was going to say thanks or congratulations, maybe give me a bonus or an attaboy, who knows? And
Mm,
I walked in, and the woman from HR walked in behind me and sat down at the desk. And he said, Nina, we are releasing you from your contract without cause per your contract. We're releasing from release per your contract. We're releasing you without cause.
yeah.
And I just remember sitting there thinking, this isn't, I mean, I looked at him, was like, you're not serious. Like, It's not me. It is very personal. No one leaves that alone. And no one takes that not personally. And
Mm.
he said, and I said, have I done something wrong? And he was very obvious now, because now I've had to do this on the other end of it as an executive in a tech company. He just kept saying the same sentence: per your contract, we are releasing you from your contract without cause. And that's all he was allowed to say. It was a nationwide layoff. They handed me a box of my stuff and took me out the front door. And I remember sitting in my car and like with my box of everything on
Yeah.
my desk, 10 years on
Yeah.
my desk on my lap, thinking, I don't even know what to do or where to go. I had young kids. They were home with a babysitter. I was in the middle of a divorce. I didn't want to call the sitter. I couldn't go anywhere in my town because everybody knew me. And they were like, why are you in makeup and not on the, so that piece of the struggle, like I ended up driving over. My parents lived nearby, and they were out of town, and I went and got some shoes out of my mom's closet, a size too small for me, because I had heels on, and I crammed my feet in her sneakers, and I walked up and down the beach for a few hours trying to figure out what to do with my life.
Mm.
But anytime something like that happens to any of us, you have this moment of, how did I get here? Is this my life? What comes next?
Yeah.
And that piece of that personal struggle, I think companies know it. I mean, when I was on the other end having to do that with people, and let people go, and forced ranking layoffs, um, it just feels like crap on both ends. But we've got to come up with a better way. It's
Yeah.
always personal. It's always
Yeah.
personal.
I noticed you have an extensive list of companies that you've, had speaking engagements with. Does that ever come up? How we're treating the employees, trying to offer a resilience plan for them? Is that part of the engagement?
It's not part of my engagement. It's not in the
Mhm.
wheelhouse that I'm in. I do more of the, you're the main character in your story. How are you handling all of this? But then I do throw it back on the leaderships and go, you are a character in everybody else's story. And
Mm.
everyone you work with, and your family, and your spouse, and your kids, and all your employees, and your leadership team, you are a character in their story. How would they talk about you? What words would they use to describe you? Are you the hero or the villain? Who are you trying to be? So I don't do that specifically. I kind of set the stage for that. And there are people that are experts in the HR space that have programs for that. And I
Yeah.
sort of lean them in that direction. I like to just get them thinking and make
Yeah.
them question themselves. And then I kind of poke them in the right direction.
I love that. I love thinking about thinking, the whole cognitive science piece behind it. What were some, when you were going through some of the despair or some of the trauma, what were what were the challenges in the narrative? Like you kept telling yourself, like, or what was the story? How did you kind of work through some of that?
Well, at the time, and I'll warn your audience, this can be triggery, and I don't always share this story, but you and I talked a little bit beforehand, and I'm assuming your audience in HR has also heard these
Mm.
types of stories. But I was a popular news anchor, and so everybody knew my business. And I won't go into all the details because I don't want to trauma dump on folks, but I was involved in an accident in a driveway at a bus stop, and a small child, a baby, crawled under my car,
Mm.
and you can kind of play it forward from there. Baby survived and everybody was okay, but it was, headline news. And he wasn't okay at first. It was days and weeks and months before we knew this child was going to live. And so in those days and weeks and months, I was I wasn't on the air doing the news. I was holed up in my house and thinking everybody was saying horrible things about me. And the self-talk, that piece in your head, the thinking that you asked about, I felt like I was a monster, and I wasn't at fault, and it was nobody's fault. And there's police reports to show that, no one has control over a baby when it's crawling. It was, no one can blame a baby. It just was a horrible situation all around.
Mm.
But in my head, I was a monster, and who would ever want to, you know, be around me, and the world was a better place without me, and how would I ever go back on TV and anyone ever look at me in any way except that? When in reality, I was getting lovely letters from people who were praying for me and thinking for me, and thinking of me. There were prayer vigils all over town because this was such a public event.
Mm.
Um, and it became such a big, I share all this because it became such a big public event, and that public pain was a very much a piece of it. I think it used to be, think about this, back in the day when something like that would happen, maybe if it wasn't a news anchor, it wouldn't even make the news. It was just a thing that happened. It was just sad for those people. Well, nowadays, I was a news anchor then, so everybody knew. But today, it's with Facebook, and everything's instantly public. So
Hmm.
there is no private pain anymore. everyone's dealing with this public pain in a very different way than we did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It wasn't a thing before. I guess Facebook was probably the first thing, but before all the social media became everybody's news is everywhere. And so now that public pain that I was going through was something that was very different for me to deal with. And I was in some uncharted territory. Now, I had very publicly not made the Olympic team, and I had very publicly blown out my knee and made the front page of the college paper as, the next athlete to lose her sport. I had had some public eyes on me in a negative way in the past, but
Yeah.
this was really different. And this was a sadness and a self-talk that I couldn't get myself past. And I was crying. I was so worried about not me, really. I was worried about this baby
Yeah.
and the family and who were dear friends. I was worried about all the other stuff. So that sadness on top of my own overwhelm and seeing helplessly feeling like there's no way forward, it just put me in a really, really dark place. Now, I did get some good therapy. And this, the news cycle went on to something else. He got out of the hospital and was fine. Went back to having life, and he had some surgeries and things, but he survives in college now. This was many, many years ago. So I did have to adjust my thinking because at the same time, the world kept moving and people went on to talk about other things. I was the only one still stuck in that space.
Yeah.
Everybody else had moved on to other things. And I went back on the air. And my therapist said, leave on your own terms if you want to leave. I went back on the air for a year. I was no longer that person that was involved in this accident. I was just Nina who did the news every night. So it was a very different vibe, than in the reality than what was going on in my head, which was just really, really dark and scary and seemed like, and I'm sure you've had this too. I just didn't want this to be part of my story. I wanted to be the world-class athlete and everyone's favorite news anchor. I didn't want to be this.
Sure.
This wasn't part of the plan,
Yeah. I'm a fan of Dr. Paul Conti. I don't know if you've heard of his book, Trauma, The Invisible Epidemic. And he talks about we punish ourselves, we avoid dealing with it, or we try to control others as like the negative responses to it. And I added a T at the end so I could just say packed with trauma. The T being living the truth of the trauma.
Right.
And that's where I see resilience and this ability to understand resilience of, you're facing adversity. How do you bounce back? How do you learn from it in the process? And just being able to live in a certain truth. If it's a traumatic event, it's a traumatic event. Or if it's a celebration moment, it's a celebration moment. But just being able to identify ways that resilience really helps contribute to staying healthy.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people misunderstand what resilience is. And until I really sat back and did a ton of research and wrote my first book and spent time on it, I don't think I understood what resilience is either. So it's very different from persistence or grit. It's not just get back up and keep going. The definition that I use in my speaking and when I'm doing work is your ability to learn, grow stronger, and adapt in a positive way to whatever happens in your life. It's that adapt in a positive way. So the best example I have is January 1st, 2020. All of us were there. All your listeners were there. You and I were there. So January 1st, 2020, we woke up and we had a New Year's resolution. We probably had plans. For some of us, it was the year we're going to get in shape or, fix this relationship or take that trip or get that promotion. We had a thing that we were going after, right? And then the world changed around us with COVID. And you couldn't just double down and go hard. You couldn't, that's persistence. You couldn't just double down, go hard and get there. And grit, you couldn't just make it happen. You had to do things differently. And that's what resilience is. Resilience is your ability to adapt in a positive way because you just can't go forward. Persistence and grit won't work in some situations. You have to change.
Yeah. And that's when
the difference.
That's when your book came out too, right? 2020. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. There's another story in itself. I left my big corporate career with my big paycheck. I left that in the end of 2019 to launch a speaking career. Ooh, great timing. Yeah. Great timing to be booked all over the country when it all shut down.
When did you make the connection between these moments you've had in your life, these stories to, hey, this is this is what I need to be doing.
Yeah. Well, when I turned 50, my kids were all off at college. I have three adult children now. But when I turned 50, my kids were headed off to college and I'd had real success. So I'd had some success in television. And then when I worked in tech, I went from, startup to I was vice president marketing comms during a very successful IPO. And I had a
Mm.
lot of shares. So I had some big success there too. And then I got to a point where I'm like, what do I really want to do next? What's my next thing? I'm always thinking ahead. Me 5 years from now, who do I want to be? And in that, I read somebody else's book and somebody else's idea, and they said, hey, go back and look at your calendar for the last 3 months. And then, because everybody has electronic calendars now. So
Yeah.
take your calendar for the last few months and then mark it up with colors. Mark one color with things that you hated to do, make it red, and stuff that you really loved to do, make it another color. Circle things that you felt like you were giving back, make it another color, and literally print it out and then circle all the stuff in front of you and look at it and see what has been bringing you joy and where you've been adding value. And so I did that. I didn't do 3 months. I think I did two, but I put 2 months worth of my life out there and I looked at my calendar and I realized that the places where I really felt like I was making a difference were nothing to do with my job because I didn't work in HR. I was, I had about 250 people that reported to me in different departments, marketing, communications, media, and culture. But I wasn't an HR person, but the pieces of my calendar that I really loved, that I could see were the right color, they were the syncs that people had scheduled on my calendar. That sometimes it was people I didn't even know. Someone would just schedule a sync on your calendar, and I'd show up in this glass picture corporate America in a little glass cube with a two-person meeting, and they'd have their back to the glass, and I'd sit down and go, hi, you don't work for me or work with me, so what are we talking about here?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they would say, I'm going through this really tough time, and I heard you're really good at helping people through stuff. And my first thought was always, I'm not HR, but my next thought was, I'm going to help this person. And sometimes it was, and it always started off with something like, I just can't handle this, or this is just too much, or I can't believe this is my life. So this concept of this is what I've carried forward in my
Yeah.
speaking. That's that this is not the end. It always started with a quiet, kind of whispered, concerned sentence of something like that. And
Mm.
sometimes it was like a young guy. One time it was a young guy whose wife was pregnant, and he's like, I'm having panic attacks coming over the bridge and I can't breathe and I don't know what to do. And I helped him. Another time it was a woman who was my same age, who had teenage children at the time, who said, and her husband had passed. And she's like, I
Mm.
just don't want to go on. And I don't know how to live life like this. And then, different times these things on my calendar showed up and I thought I really made a difference in those moments. And I felt like I was able to help in a real meaningful way. Sometimes one time it was a guy that showed up at my door in my neighborhood, picture suburban Charleston,
Mm.
he showed up and I opened up and he's standing there and he had two beers in his hands and tears in his eyes. And he's like,
Mm.
Nina, I just got fired and I don't even know how to tell my wife or what to do. And I was like, I got you. And came in, walked through the house, sat on the end of the dock and figured it out, helped him with a script to tell his wife, helped him
Mm.
think about his talent in a different way, made him see it wasn't personal. This was, just all the stuff that you got to do. And I'm not a chaplain. I am not
Yeah. Yeah.
HR,
Yeah.
but I knew that that's where I was adding value. And in that same year, as I did that exercise, my dad had Alzheimer's. And I thought to myself, what if I'm not here to help my children through these things? What if I'm not around to help the people I love? I could be next. That's a horrible disease.
Mm.
And I'm turning 50. So at the time I was. And so I was like, how do I get all that together? So that's when I started thinking I should write a book. I should put it out there. This is what
Yeah.
I should be doing. And that was the big shift for me. There was
Yeah.
about a 2 month period in there where I did that exercise and I thought about what if I'm not here anymore? Because my dad was going through that. And I thought about who do I want to be 5 years from now? Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I love the connection with something just kind of bigger than ourselves. Like you talked about value added, but I also loved hearing you were helping that adaptability piece even before the book and the workshops. And you talk about resilience being having that adaptability. I'm sensing this connection with this grieving moment to adaptability as well. How do I script this? How do I get a narrative around this? How do I articulate what this moment means? And it's really about how do I live with this? Grief isn't, moving on, but learning how to live with. And that adaptability piece really ties into that. How do you live with this.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have a 4-part framework that I walk people through, and it's not rocket science. It's just as simple as I can make it for folks. But there is a piece of me and a piece of you. I want to make sense and make our lives into something bigger and better. But before I answer that question completely, I do think I was in a moment of my life where I had the ability to step away and do something bigger. There were seasons of my life where I just had to do the job. I think I had to make the money. You've been there too. Like, I don't want everybody to think, hey, you have to go find the job right now that's going to be your purpose. Great. If you can tie some purpose into what you're doing, that's great. But it's fine to go through a season of your life where you're really good at something and be nose to the grindstone and just be really freaking good at it and make
Yeah.
the money you need to make to put your family in the right position to do the things you want to do. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying I was in my dream job at the time. I
Mhm.
was talented at a thing and I worked really hard on it. But then I got to a point that allowed me the opportunity. That season of my life allowed me the opportunity to now look at my life and go,
Yeah.
what purpose do I want to tie into?
Like a springboard.
Yeah. It was built the foundation for me to be able to do the other. Had I
Yeah.
not done the season of that, I wouldn't have the
Hmm.
financial stability. I wouldn't be able to go write and speak and do what I do now. I just
Yeah.
wouldn't be in a position to do that. Not with the lifestyle that I wanted for me and my family and my kids. And I was the breadwinner, and had great support around me. So I felt a responsibility there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait,
No.
back to the other question. I don't think I answered it. I apologize.
No. We go how the conversation flows. I was thinking about that moment you spend in something, even though you know it's leading somewhere else. Being okay with that's huge for mental health, I believe.
Yeah, I think one of the pieces, this because it's a stage of grief, one of the pieces is getting to acceptance. You can't go back and redo. We don't get a redo unless you are like know the Flash and know this can jump into the Speed Force or something. I don't know. Maybe you have the ring. Maybe you have the time stone. I don't know. But sorry, I do a lot of
No, I love
superhero analogies.
it.
But
Love the
like we
Flash.
don't.
That's my favorite, actually.
Oh, I love the Flash too. So yeah, I don't know the Speed Force and I don't have the time stone. Like we're here, so we can't go back. And so we have to figure out a way forward. And I talk about that. That's this acceptance piece. And one of the pieces of the framework that I talk about is isolate, like in the moment now. And any good therapist will tell you if you're spending all your time thinking about the past, that's where depression lives. And if you're spending all your time thinking about the future, what ifs, that's where anxiety lives. So the
Yeah.
woulda, shoulda, couldas is depression, and the what ifs is anxiety. So we have this moment right here. And to get to an acceptance piece in that moment gives us an opportunity to take some action. And really all we want is back to have control over our lives because something has happened that we don't feel like we're in control anymore.
Mm.
So those moments are really key. One of my favorite things that I talk to people about is when things happen in your life. And my favorite chapter 6 in my book, my favorite concept is this lifetime timeline, and when things happen. And I'll share this with you because I think you'll like it because you're about to make a big change in your own life.
Yeah.
So if you look at, if you drew a timeline from 0 to 100, like a line across a piece of paper, I have people do the exercise, and you go 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Like that's a whole lifetime right there. I'd like to pretend I'm going to live to be 100. I need to drink less wine and take better care of myself, but I'm pretending that I'm going to get to 100.
Same.
So yeah. So you can, on that timeline somewhere, you can put a dot where you are right now. Like you're on that timeline and everything you've done up till now is, behind you. And then there's this giant blank space ahead, which is so much hope and just gives you a blank space. And sometimes I remember that image when I'm in a tough spot. And I'll use the same timeline and go think about something that happened in your life. And for me, the example that I use is when I've lost my sport. I was 19 when I blew out my knee. I was doing a beam dismount. I was in the PMAC at LSU competition through the dismount. My knee was like a stick shift when I landed, just gone.
Mm.
And so career-ending injury. And so I had this moment at 19 where life completely changed. It was not the part of the plan. I thought I had 3 more years of college, ended up working in the laundry room. I sometimes joke, like my claim to fame almost was I washed Shaquille O'Neal's jockstrap. There we go. But not what I was planning. But
That's
I ended up,
not the mountaintop you envisioned for your
no,
career.
no, not what I wanted on my tombstone. Not what I was thinking. But, I had to work for the athletic department to keep my scholarship. And so I ended up working in the athletic locker room. I mean, in the athletic laundry room, which wasn't like cute little leotards. It was like everybody's laundry, and really a bad moment in my life. So I'm in a really tough spot there. I'm 19. And I think my life's over. But at 19, if I look at how many years I'd spent doing gymnastics was now 78% of my life I'd spent in a gym. 78% at 19. Got it?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I play it forward, so of course it felt like my life was over. It's everything I knew I'd spent
Yeah.
in a gym. So if I play it forward, though, when I'm 50 and my kids leave for college, then it's like 28% of my life. And if I live to be 100, then it's only 15% of my life, gymnastics.
Yep.
You see, it just is, it's different. It felt like everything when it happened. But down the road, it feels very different. I did almost 20 years in TV, and that's just one of the stretches on my lifetime timeline. I have years in gymnastics. I have years in television. I have years in tech. Like, you're going to have this stretch on your timeline, maybe, and then it's going to be blank space ahead.
Yep.
And who knows what, it's just very, very different to think of how things feel in the moment when they happen in our lives.
And I'm connecting the encouragement is to see that space ahead as an opportunity to create, right? It's just be creative, have fun with it, enjoy it. You get what you get as far as the time goes.
You get one life, and you are in control of what happens next. Sometimes you're not in control of what happens in the moment, but you're always in control of what happens next. How you get yourself back up. I say it's okay to not be okay. It's just not okay to stay that way.
Yeah.
And now sometimes things take you months or even a year to get through something. But at a certain point, you've got to get yourself out of it, and it's up to you. But it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way. So that blank space ahead is, hey, this is your one life. What are you going to do with it? You know?
There might be some watching, listening that maybe they need to write a book. Maybe they need to start talking. So much power in stories, and such as yours. And I love the impact that your story has. And I always want to focus on stories that are building and developing resilience in others. And obviously why I wanted to invite you to be a guest on this show. But thank you so much for taking that step, for writing that book, for developing the workshops and, everything that you're doing, because it's just going to keep, it's going to keep developing, and others are going to, find their voice and find their space ahead of them and work on that too. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for doing that and being that. I want to end on, a bit more, positive note. With that, just saying thank you for one. I was curious about the one thing, if you were talking to someone who just took over a leadership position and they want to develop their team, aside from having you come speak to them.
And there's a lot of great leadership speakers out there. I do some executive offsites. So sometimes, because I've been in that space, I've been in the boardroom, I have that real world experience. So I do an executive offsite, and I have a keynote around that about continuing to level up for them personally. But as far as what I would tell a new person in leadership, is the same thing that I say in that workshop, and that when I mentor people as they're going through the stages of their careers, no matter what stage you're in, but certainly in leadership, you're a character in everybody's story around you.
Yeah.
And if this was the story of your life, and it was a book sitting on a table in front of you, and that's the story of your life, what character are you playing? But more importantly, in all the books on all the other tables of all these other people's stories, what character are you playing in everybody else's story? You have an opportunity to be the hero. Don't be the villain.
Yeah.
Be the hero.
I got a text message this morning from a good friend of mine. She just put in a notice that she's quitting her job, and the response from the leadership was not good. True Colors came out, just openly talking about her. And I'm just like, that's
shitty. I don't know if I'm the right person on yours.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Shitty.
Yeah.
It's just not okay.
Yeah. No, it's.
And she probably gave a lot to that company and
one of the best. It and it's just, she just got to a point where she saw something bigger for herself, and she took that step, and she's taken that step. And it's just another example of why I'm so passionate about hearing voices like yours is be kind. Like, you are that character in someone else's story, the hero.
Kindness goes far, and
it's so underrated.
On for taking on, right. Thank her for the value that she added. People just want to be seen for their value too.
Yeah.
the real, the right response is to thank them for all the time and energy and
Yeah.
they're sharing their talents and to wish them the best. And,
Yeah.
that, yeah.
If I'm a leader and someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I've been thinking about this. I want to do this." I would hope that I'm grateful that I've allowed an environment where they continue to grow to where they saw something that they needed to pursue. Uh,
Or had an open enough relationship where if they were in an
yeah.
environment that didn't work for them, where they
Yeah.
would go, "Hey, I found something else that's really great, that
Yeah.
it fits me better," and I
Yeah.
would celebrate their happiness and success at something else that fits them better.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to
Yeah.
be
Be
that
the
guy.
hero. Be the
Be the
hero. Don't be
hero.
the villain.
Yeah, be the hero, people. It's not that
Yeah.
hard to be kind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nina, thank you. What are ways that you want people to connect with you? What's the best way? Instagram. I know you got a great Instagram.
Oh,
Nina
thanks.
underscore sp dot eeks.
SP is Sossamon-Pogue and then
Yeah.
speaker. Like
Yeah.
we thought it would be a clever way to do it. It's ridiculous, but that's what it is.
I love
It's
it.
Nina Speaks all broken up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love folks to follow me on Instagram. I'm really trying to build that community. That's more of my
Yeah.
personal one-to-one stuff. On LinkedIn, if you're looking for me to speak, I do more of what I offer to companies on my LinkedIn page. And then I started to do some stuff on TikTok. I've got a new team that's making me do it. And it's pretty, I think I'm funny. And so it's kind of entertaining. It's similar to what I'm doing on Instagram, but I'd love folks to follow me there. You can always DM me and reach out personally. Buy my book if you're struggling. And
Yeah.
then I just launched this Now What workshop, which is brand new out there. And it just is, if you have a now what moment, you get fired or fail or divorce or get caught up in a scandal or something.
All at the same time.
Yeah, or all of the above. Oh my gosh, call me if all of those happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, now what? And so it just kind of
Mm.
gets people to a better place so they don't, you know, do something that they're going to regret.
All right. I will have all that in the show notes. Go follow Nina. Listen to what she's got going on. A lot of great stuff. Thank you so much for your time today. And yeah, I look forward to continuing to hear what happens in the future and where you go.
Thanks, Evie, and stay in touch. Good luck to you in your next chapter too. I'm excited to see what you do.
Yeah, grace and peace to you. Thank you. All right, my friends, that was Nina Sossamon-Pogue offering some amazing insights into how to establish a resilient lifestyle, how to deal with trauma, how to be adaptable, realizing the character in our story and the character in other people's stories that we are. So many great things. So I recommend and highly encourage you to go back and listen to this one a few times. And I really hope that we can just learn how to be kind to ourselves, to others, and understand just how impactful being kind is and the doors that that opens. It's amazing. So stay strong, stay resilient. Let's keep fighting the good fight. And until next time, EB out here.